All right, everyone. Welcome to Coding from Scratch Lecture 2. We're going to be going over JavaScript, terminal, and source control. I do have slides prepared and a format that we can go through, but if there's something specific that you guys have gone through the curriculum that you want me to focus on a little bit more, please let me know now so I can put a more emphasis on that rather than material that you feel more comfortable with. So I'm going to open the floor up now to see if anyone wants me to go over anything specifically. So go ahead and unmute yourself if you have something specific you want me to go through. Otherwise, I can just go through the slides, which has a very large emphasis on JavaScript. So if you are struggling with the terminal or source control, please let me know now so I can put more emphasis on that. All right. If it does so happen that you have something that you want me to go over, please let me know, but I'll just go ahead and jump through the slides. But if there's something specific you want me to focus on, please let me know because we are at a limited time span of about an hour and a half, depending on your guys' saturation point. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is Coding from Scratch, JavaScript, terminal, and source control. Oops. All right, so what is JavaScript? JavaScript is the only programming language that is understood by every modern web browser. You can kind of think of JavaScript as the muscle of a website. It allows us to have that user interaction that we have on websites. So HTML is kind of considered the skeleton, CSS is the skin, and JavaScript would be that muscle that makes everything happen. So when we are dealing with JavaScript and HTML, you want to use a script tag to connect the two files together. So if I were to have, and let me just go ahead and open this here, move this over here. Okay, so let's say I have a file here. Let me just get rid of this. And we have an HTML file, and I have some HTML code. And I have some JavaScript that I want to connect to my HTML. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a script tag, which you want to put at the end of your body. So right before the closing tag of your body tag, you're going to have script. And it does have a closing tag. So you have there. And then inside of the opening tag, you want to use the attribute source. And basically, you're just telling it where this file is. So this file is directly inside of my project folder. So in quotations, I'm just going to put the name of the file. And now these two files are connected. My HTML and my JavaScript code are now connected with each other. And that's how you're going to link the two files together. So if you are working on your project, you're working on your JavaScript, and nothing's happening, make sure that your script file is there. Your script tag is there, excuse me, in your script file. All right, any questions on linking the two files together? All right, we'll keep it trucking then. Go this way. So when you're dealing with JavaScript, you will be dealing with variables. And basically what those variables are essentially containers of information. They hold value and information that you'll be using over and over again throughout your code. Maybe you have a counter that is keeping track of where you are in a loop, for example. And that variable keeps getting updated as you're going through the loop. Now, variables can have different data types. You can have a string, which is basically anything that appears on the keyboard, and that is represented by quotations. You can have numbers, which is going to be basically numbers, 1, 35, negative 100, what have you. It could be decimal, it could be a whole number, it could be a negative number. Those are going to be data type number. Then we have Booleans, which is going to be true or false. And then we have objects. I'm not going to get into objects because that's going to go get covered in the next course. But just keep that in the back of your head that a variable could equal an object. So if we are looking here at the example, we have var student name equals Ricardo. So what data type is student name? Anyone feel free to jump in and let me know the answer. Nathan, I'm going to call on you. What data type is student name?
So string or text.
Right. It will be a data type string because Ricardo is surrounded by quotations, so that indicates that is a string. So this variable is data type string. Now, just to see other variables here, we can have a number of other variables, right? We can have student name, which we have as Ricardo. Then we can have a student ID. That could be 34, that's data type number. And we can have another variable, maybe is enrolled. Is the student enrolled? And that could equal true, and that would be a Boolean. Okay, so these are the different data types that we could have. We can also have object, but I'm not going to go ahead and put that in your head yet. We'll just wait for the next course on that one. So there we have the 3 out of 4 data types that we could have when we're dealing with JavaScript variables. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into if statements. If statements are also known as decision constructs, and essentially why they're called that is because you have to make a decision, right? If something is true, then we want something else to happen. Else, we want this other thing to happen, right? So we're making a decision. We're deciding something based on a condition. There's different variations of if statements. You can have an if else, if else, if else. There's different variations. So let me go ahead and just jump into it so you can see it. So if we are looking here, let's say we write an if statement and we're checking to see if the student is enrolled. If the student is enrolled, then I want to print out a message that says, welcome to the course, right? So if is enrolled equals true. So something I want to point out here is 2 equal signs. You'll see 2 equal signs, and you'll see 3 equal signs, and you'll see 1 equal sign. 1 equal sign means that we're changing the value. So if I were to have 1 equal sign here, I'm changing the value of is enrolled to true, meaning that if it was equal to false or anything else before, it is now equal to true. But that's not what we want here. We want to compare values. So if we're comparing values, then we have 2 equal signs. We're saying, okay, is it true? Okay, that's the value, and we're comparing that. Now, if you see 3 equal signs, that means that you're comparing value and data type. So we are checking to see that they're both Booleans and that they both equal true. So an example of that is, let's say you're comparing it to the number 2. Let's say you have 2 in quotations and then the data type 2. So you have a string data type and a number data type. If we have 2 equal signs, we're comparing values. What is the value of both of them? 2. So that would return true. But if we were to have 3 equal signs, we're comparing data type and value. One is string and one is number. So they do not match on data type. So that's going to return false. So just be mindful of that, of the different equal signs and what they mean. Most commonly, you're going to use a 3 equal sign because you kind of want to be safe with your data type. But it's not always necessary. So just a little side note there. So if is enrolled is equal to true, then I want to console log welcome to the course. right? So now if I run this piece of code, I get welcome to the course down here. Now, if I were to change is enrolled to false up here, I'm not going to get anything printed out, because what happens is if this returns false, if this expression is false, what's going to happen is it's going to jump outside of these curly brackets, not run the code in there, and jump to whatever code is here, okay? So if we run this, we're not going to get anything, because is enrolled is equal to false. Okay? And if we see down here, we don't get anything there. Okay? So that is an example of an if statement just by itself. Now you can have an if-else statement. And basically what that means is if this is not true, if we get false, it's going to run this code no matter what. So it's kind of like a fail-safe, right? So here, if that is the case, then I want to do, you should enroll today. Okay, so if we run through this code verbally, is enrolled equal to true? It's equal to false, so that's going to return a false statement, which means we skip all of that and we jump to this else statement, and we'll run this code no matter what. Okay, so if we run that, we get you should enroll today. Now, there's also if, else, if. So maybe you're checking multiple conditions, right? Like you're checking to see if something it is, and if it's not, okay, that's fine, but is it this? So let's see an example here. Let's see. Say if is enrolled is equal to true. Let's add a statement here. Else if. So if the student's not enrolled, but let's say we want to check for student ID. Else if the student ID is equal to 34, then I want to say, hi, Ricardo, please finish your enrollment paperwork. Else, I'm going to have, you should enroll today. Okay, so if we run through this, first we're checking to see if the student is enrolled. Okay, if that's true, then welcome to the course. Else if, okay, if they're not enrolled, I want to check if it's a specific student. And I'm checking to see it by their student ID. So I'm checking to see, okay, if they're not enrolled, but are they student number 34? If that's true, then I want to print out, hi, Ricardo, please finish your enrollment paperwork. And if that's not true, then all I'm going to print out is you should enroll today. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get, and then change the values a bit to see the different variations. If I run this, we should get, hi, Ricardo, please finish your enrollment paperwork. Okay, and that's what we get down here. Now let's just change things up a bit. Let's say let's change his student ID to 24, and let's change this to true. If I were to run this, what do you think my result would be? Samantha.
Sorry, I'm a little lost.
Okay, where can I help you get found?
You changed the student ID variable? Is that what
Okay,
you did?
so I changed the student ID variable to 24. So if we were to run this code with this information here, where would we fall? So let's go through it out loud.
Okay.
So is enrolled equal to true? What is enrolled equal to?
True.
Okay, so it's equal to true. So is true equal to true?
Right.
Okay, so then we're running this line of code then, because this is what came out to be true. So we're going to run this line of code, and then if we run one of these, all the rest gets skipped. So the rest of this gets skipped, and we should only see welcome to the course.
Okay, so it's an if then.
Right, but there is an else if. So if that first condition isn't met, it's going to check a different condition.
Okay, I get it.
Cool. All right, so let me go ahead and change something up a bit here. All right, Cody, with the changes I've made now, what should we expect the console to print out?
Sorry about that. I'm watching my son at the moment.
Oh,
Actually, yeah, I'm a little lost. I missed that last part there.
okay. So let's run through the code out loud.
Yeah.
So let's look at our values. And now let's go ahead and jump into our if statement. So the first condition that we're checking is we're checking to see if is enrolled is equal to true. What is that condition going to return?
If it's true, it's going to return welcome to the course.
Right. But
Yeah.
what is it right now? If we look at,
right now it's false, so.
Right. So it's going to skip this part, right?
Yeah.
So now we're going to check to see, okay, that didn't work. That's false. But now let's go ahead and check our student ID. Is student ID equal to 34?
Okay, no. And so then
Right.
all right.
Right. So now we're going to get, you should enroll today if we were to run this.
Yeah.
Cool. We good?
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone have any questions on if, else statements, anything in that category before I jump into the next topic? This lecture is going to be pretty fast paced. So if you need me to slow down, please let me know. There's a lot of material to cover. So I want to make sure you guys feel comfortable with if statements. All right, so I'm going to take silence as you guys are okay. So we'll go ahead and jump to the next topic of arrays. So an array is a data structure that we use to store values. You can kind of think of them as a list of items or values or elements. You can use arrays to store multiple values. So if we're looking at an example here of fruit array, and how we set them up is how we set up variables as well, right? So we have a variable fruit array, and then these square brackets indicate that it is an array, aka a list of items. This array has the data type of string, right? It's an array full of strings. And the arrays can be long, they can be little, they can have nothing inside of them, but how we indicate that something is an array is with those square brackets. So if we are looking at arrays here, I'm just going to comment this out here. So if we're looking at array here, let's say we're dealing with a shopping list. Right. Let's say we have an array, we have our square brackets, and this shopping list is going to be items that I need to purchase, right? So I need to buy some water, eggs, bathroom cleaner, okay? So we have a list of items in this array. Now, if we need to reach a particular item on the list, there has to be a way for us to indicate where it is on the list. When we write out a list on a piece of paper, usually we have either bullet points or maybe we list them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you say, hey, what's number 5 on the list? You can go to number 5 and read that. So kind of the same concept here. What that is called in terms of array and coding is an index. So an index number is essentially the number that points to that element, the value of that element. So just like when you go to a textbook and you go to the back to the index and you look up a topic, it says, okay, it's on page 47. You go to page 47 and you find that information. So same thing here. Now with coding, indexes start at 0. Normally we count from 1, right? And say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With coding, you start with 0. So water is the first element, but it is index 0. So water is index 0, eggs is 1, bathroom cleaner is 2, and paper towels is 3. So the index numbers go from 0 to 3 in this particular case, but there are 4 elements inside of it. So that's very key to remember, is that indexes always start at 0. So if I were to console.log shopping list at index 2, and some side note here, when you are referencing an array at a particular index, you write the array name, square brackets, and then the index number that you want to be dealing with. Or that could be a variable, but we'll touch on that later. So if I were to console log shopping list at index 2, what should I expect to be seen on the console? Michael.
Sorry, I missed that. What were you asking?
For this console log right here, line 17, what should I expect to see?
You should see the second item in the shopping list, or the third actually, bathroom cleaner.
Correct. So we should see bathroom cleaner. Oh, whoops, I needed to save my code. Bathroom cleaner. Perfect, great job.
Thank you.
All right, so that is our indexes. Now, if we need to figure out the length of an array, and this is going to be helpful once you get into for loops, hint, hint, you use a method called .length. So if I need to figure out the length of something, of an array, I can just do shopping list .length. Okay, so let's say I want to console log that. I should expect the number 4 because there are 4 elements in the array. And we get 4. Okay. Now with arrays, there are so many methods that exist for arrays that will make your life easier, like sorting it in alphabetical order, seeing if a particular element is included in the array, seeing what the index number of a particular element is. There are so many out there. I highly recommend you on your spare time or your free time when you're studying to look up different methods on arrays, because when you're working with arrays and you're trying to figure something out, if you think that there might be a method that exists to do this for you, it probably does. But I'm going to go ahead and show you 2 methods that are in the curriculum that you'll be using in order to add or remove to remove an element. So if, let's say I forgot something, I forgot to put something on the list, like, I don't know, dog food. So I am going to write the array, and then I'm going to do .push with my parentheses, and inside of my parentheses, I'm going to say what I want to add to the array. So there, I'm going to put dog food. Okay, and what this does, and this is very important to remember, is that it's going to push this item at the end of the list. So dog food will now be index 4, and the length will now be 5. So if I were to print this out, we can see that dog food has been added to our array and is indeed at the end. Okay, so push is always going to add whatever item you want onto your array, but remember it's going to put it at the end. Now, let's say you wanted to remove something. There is a method called pop. So shopping list.pop is going to remove the last item on your list. No matter what you put inside of here, it's always going to remove the last item of the list. So if I were to run this right now, it's going to remove the last item on the list, which is dog food that we just added. So if we do that, and we console log it, did it delete it? There we go. Now we're to run this. We see that dog food was added with the dot push, and then with the pop, it was removed. So pop is always going to remove the last item on the list. Any questions on arrays? Oop, I got a hand. Cody?
Hey there. Yeah, actually, this probably seems like a simple question, but what purpose so you have to put console log at the end of pretty much every bit there?
The purpose of console log is to show you what's going on. So you don't have to use console log in your code. It's just a debugging tool to see what's going on. So it's just like a reference point, like, okay, I did all this code, but let me just make sure that it's doing what I think it's supposed to be doing.
All right, so you can streamline it by leaving it out, but it's good to use.
Yeah,
for...
I could.
Right.
Yeah, I only put it so you guys can see what's happening, but there is no need for me to use it.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic here. Loops. So loops is a pretty big topic here. This is where people start to get a little bit confused. So please let me know if you have any questions, or if you want me to stop at any point. But loops enable us to repeat a series of commands until a certain condition is met. There are so many different kinds of loops that exist out there in JavaScript and in a bunch of other languages. We have for each, for of, until, while, do whiles. There's a bunch of loops that exist out there, but I am going to mainly focus on a for loop because that is the fundamental of loops. You can understand a for loop, you can pretty much get the rest of them. So with a for loop, you have your for, and then you have these parentheses, which I don't think you can see that well. And within that, you have 3 segments. Basically a starting point, a stopping point, and a way to keep track of where you are in the loop. So I'm just going to jump into some code so you can see what I'm talking about here. So let's say we have a loop that I want to just print the numbers 1 through 10, right? So I'm going to have my for loop. I'm just going to set it up here. And then I have my 3 parts. So the first part is going to be considered like your starting point. Most commonly, you'll see var I equals 0, right? Basically what that's saying is, hey, I'm creating a variable called I, and this is what's going to keep track of where I am in my loop, and I'm going to start off at the number 0. Now, it does not have to be I. It could equal anything. You could put bananas for all I care. But most commonly, you're going to see I because that's short for index. And this 0, it doesn't have to be 0. If you wanted to start at the number 15, you can start at 15 and set I equal to 15. This is essentially just your starting point. In this example, I'm just printing out the numbers 0 through 10, so my starting point is going to be 0. The next portion is going to be the condition. So this is the condition that is checked before whatever is in the curly brackets is ran. So this is saying, okay, as long as whatever is in here is true, similar to what we wrote in the if statements in between these parentheses, as long as that's true, then I'm going to go ahead and run the code inside of these curly brackets. So here we will have I less than 11. Okay? And that is our stopping point. And I call it our stopping point because as soon as that hits false, then we are not running the loop anymore. Then we'll see something like I++, or maybe you'll see I minus minus. Basically what this is what we want to happen to our index after this iteration has been completed. Okay, so here we're starting F at 0. As long as I is still less than 11, then we're going to do the stuff that's in between the curly brackets. And once we're done doing that, we're just going to add 1 to I to keep track of where we are in our loop. So if I were just to console log here, I'm going to have 0 through 10 printed out because we start off at 0. We check this condition. Is 0 less than 11? Yep, sure is. So now I'm going to console log I, which is 0. Then I'm going to add 1. So now I is equal to 1. Now is 1 less than 11? Yep. We do it again, and we keep doing it. Now let's pretend we're at 10. We just printed out 10. We add 1 to 10. So now I is 11. Is 11 less than 11? No, it's not at all. So we are going to skip all the code that's in these curly brackets and jump down to whatever is next. So if I save this and I run it, we get those numbers. Now let's say I wanted to do a countdown, right? I wanted to count from 10 to 0. Then I'm going to change my starting point. My starting point is now 10, right? And my stopping point is I want I to be greater than or equal to 0. And then I'm just going to do I minus minus because we're going down. So I want to start at 10, then go to 9, then 8, then 7, then 6, and so on and so forth. So if I run this, we get the reverse, 10 to 0. Okay. Let's look at another loop here. Let's say, what do we want to do? Okay, let's say that we're going through our shopping list here. Let's bring this back to life. And if we have paper towels, I want to mention the fact that I need to buy 2 rolls, okay? So here we're going to change this up a bit. I'm going to have our starting point be 0 because indexes start at 0. Oh, I got a hand. Hold on. Cody, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
Quick question about the minus minus plus plus actually. Is it possible to also do multiplication or division with that?
No, so that's just incrementing or decrementing by 1.
Okay, so you couldn't like constantly keep multiplying until you reach a certain number then?
Right. So if you were like trying to times it by itself.
Yeah, so like say you had 2 and you want it to reach up to like, I don't know, say like 20. You would just it would keep going in those multiples of 2 until either those multiples are by itself.
Well, you could do, oh, you mean like times 2, like I times 2?
Yeah, and would that
Yeah,
keep...
that's fine.
Okay.
You can do that. Basically what you're doing is like, this is what I want to happen after this iteration is done. So if you want to do it in multiple 2s, you can do it. I thought you meant this, which is not.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could do a multiple twos and just times it by 2. Basically what you're saying is like, this is what happens to I after this is ran.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if we are going through the shopping list, and if it is paper towels, I want to mention 2 rows, then I'm going to have my starting point be 0 because indexes start at 0. And then I want I to be less than shopping list dot length. Okay, because remember, length is 1 more than the last index number. So once we hit that length number, we know that we're out of the loop. And then I'll do I++, and then I'm going to add an if statement here, and I'm going to say if shopping list at index I is equal to paper towels, spelled crazy, then I want to console log don't forget to get 2 rows. Okay, and then I also just want to print out the list item. So before my if statement, I'm just going to do a console log of shopping list at index I. Okay, so before I run this code, let's go ahead and take a look here. So we're looking at our for loop, and we have our starting point be 0. And then our stopping point is we want to make sure I is less than the length of shopping list. So meaning, let's take a look at the length of shopping list. We have 4 items in here, which means the length is 4, which means once we hit I equals 4, that means we're looking at index number 4. We know that we're done because index 4 doesn't exist because indexes start at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, there is no 4th index. So that's how we know we're at the end. And then we have I++, so we're just going to add 1 so we can go to the next item on the list. Well, as we're going through that, we're going to console log the shopping list at index I. So this changes. So we start off at 0. So first we're going to print out water. And then we're going to check, okay, if shopping list at index I, if we're looking at the 0 example, is water equal to paper towels? No, it's not. So it's going to skip down, add 1 to I, and then go on to shopping list at index 1. So what we should expect is all of this to be printed out, and then after paper towels, we should see, don't forget to get 2 rolls. So let's go ahead and save that and run that code, and that's what we get. Water, eggs, bathroom cleaner, paper towels, don't forget to get 2 rolls. So things are starting to compound on top of each other, right? We got variables, we have if statements, we have arrays, we have for loops, we have indexes. Are there any questions before I move on to the next topic? Things are starting to get real heavy. All right. No questions? You guys feel so confident? All right, so we'll go ahead and jump to the next topic then. Functions. So functions allow us to reuse a block of code without having to rewrite it multiple times. So basically, when you are coding, there are going to be times when you're writing something over and over and over again. You're like, man, I'm writing this so many times to do the same thing. That is a huge hint that you should probably just be using a function and define a function. So a function, you have to declare, kind of like how you declare a variable. You say var, hey, this is a variable. Same thing here. Hey, this is a function. Then you're going to have your name of function followed by parentheses. Inside of those parentheses are going to be your parameters. Essentially what a parameter is information that you need in order to get that function to work. So an example of that is, let's take a bank ATM, right? And you want to withdraw. Some parameters that you need, information in order to get that to work is you need your account number, you need your PIN, and you need the amount that you want to remove. So those would be considered parameters for that particular function. And then inside of the curly brackets is what you want to happen when that function is called on. So let's go ahead and create a function here. And let's say I have a function, and I'm just going to make a simple function that requires no parameters, and it's just going to say hello, right? So I'm going to call it greeting. I have my parentheses. There's no parameters, so there's nothing inside of those parentheses. And then I'm just going to console log hello. Okay, so this is just the definition of the function. Nothing's going to happen if I try to run this code, because I'm not calling on the function, I'm not invoking the function, I'm not using the function. I have just defined it. Oops. So in order for us to use the function, we write the function name, followed by the parentheses, and then a semicolon, because that's an executable statement. So here we save that. If we run it, I should just get hello. Okay. Now let's say I want to make this function a little bit more complicated. I wanted to pass in a parameter of a name. I want it to be a little bit more personalized. I want it to say hello, someone's name, right? So I am going to include a parameter, and a parameter, you can call them whatever you want. It's just like a variable. So I'm going to say name here, and then I'm going to do plus name. So now here I have hello. I'm going to insert the name and then add an exclamation mark. So now when I add everything together, it'll be one happy string that gets printed out. So if I try to run this how it is right now, I'm going to get an error. Does anyone know why I would get an error? Oh, I didn't. How interesting. But notice it printed something weird out. Does anyone know why that happened?
Would you have to set like a variable for the name? So define the name?
Yeah, so here we need to pass in that information when we're calling on the function here. So we didn't pass anything in here, so it made name undefined. So what we need to do is insert a name. So let's say we insert Maria. Now we get hello, Maria. Okay. Normally it would spit out an error and say no parameters were passed, so that's interesting that it said undefined. But either way, that's not what we wanted. Okay, so we need to make sure that the parameters are getting passed into the function. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there an if statement that you could write to double check that the name had a value? So it wouldn't blow up?
Yeah, so you could do if name not equal to null.
That's simple enough.
Yeah, so you're making sure that it has a value that something was actually passed in.
You want to try that without a parameter and see if it doesn't give you a...
Yeah, let's see what happens here. So if name not equal to null, then I want to console log. And then I'm going to do an else console.log, please input a name. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that, see what happens. And that we get please input a name.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and keep moving then into scope. So scope is the area in which your variables and functions can be accessed. There's three different types of scope when we're dealing with JavaScript. We have global scope, function scope, and block scope. You might have heard of global and local scope if you've touched programming before. Basically, that local scope is a combination of function and block. But essentially, global scope means that a variable has been defined outside of a function, outside of curly brackets, outside of basically everywhere. So it is accessible from anywhere in the code. So if I have a variable declared outside of everything and I use that variable inside of a function, I can access that variable within that function. And that's global scope. You want to avoid global scope as much as possible because most likely you're going to change the variable when you didn't mean to change the variable or things of that nature. So if you can, avoid global scope as much as possible, but be aware that it is there. Function scope is declared within a function and is accessed only inside of the function. So if we're looking at the code here, name is considered function scope. If I were to try to console.log name here, I'm going to get an error. Okay? And that's because name is not defined outside of here. It's only inside of this function. So if we run this, name is not defined and is referring to here because this is on function scope. And then the last scope is block scope. And basically that is a variable that's defined between any set of curly brackets. That came on later in JavaScript. And basically I think it came in ES5. And that's where you're going to see the let keyword. So sometimes you'll see some code, right? Let's just pretend I'm writing something. And I say let counter equals 0. It's kind of like a temporary variable, like, hey, I need this variable, but only in this little section here between these curly brackets. And that's going to be considered block scope. So this variable is only visible between these curly brackets. Okay, so if I try to reach it outside of these curly brackets or over here in this function, I'm going to get an error because it's only visible within this block scope. Okay, scope is something that you will run into and you want to be mindful of because there are going to be times when you are trying to work with a variable and it's not changing the way that you want it to, or it changed the way you didn't want it to, and it probably has to do with scope. So be mindful of scope and where your variables can and will be accessed. All right, any questions on scope? All right, so it looks like how time is going that we're going to be mainly focused on JavaScript. Does anyone want me to touch on terminal or source control at all? Because I might have to skip that. So if you have questions on that, let me know right now.
My only question is, how do you push it up to, or how do you even set up to push it to GitHub? Because
Okay.
I kind of gotten to where I have it set up properly finally.
Are you using GitKraken?
Yeah, I did download that.
Okay. So let me just switch gears for a hot second so I can show you that. Okay. So with GitHub and GitKraken, you signed up for GitHub already, right?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, let me go ahead and open up GitHub.
And I'm halfway sure it's linked because I was able to pull down my GitHub's folder, but
Okay,
I'm not
so
really
you were able to pull the folder onto your local computer?
Yes.
Okay, so let me open GitKraken.
Yeah, it takes a little while to open that one, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a little squid dancing. All right, let me move this guy over this way. All right, and let's look at this one, for example. Oh, hold on. Whatever. Initialize. All right. So let's say you're working on something, and let me open this in Visual Studio. Okay, and let's just pretend this is the code that we're working on. And I create a file. All right, do some stuff. Write some code. Okay, and I've made all the changes I need to make, and now I'm ready to push it onto GitHub. Okay, so when you go to GitKraken, what you see here is this one file change in working directory. So I'm just going to click View Change. It shows the file that has been changed. You can click on that, and it will show you exactly in green all the new stuff that you've added. And then you're going to stage the file, which basically means this is a save point. Like, hey, I need to save my code right now on this point because I just made a big change. So I want to save that. And then I'm going to make a comment on what I did so I can remember when I go back, or if you're working in a team, they know what you did. And I'll do added index file, right? And then I'm going to commit my change. And all of this is only saved locally on your computer. No one can see this on GitHub. The way that you see this on GitHub is hitting this big push button right here. So you hit push. Let's have a remote to do push. Oh, I didn't have a repo. Okay, well, I need to create the repo first on GitHub and then follow those steps. And then you would hit push. And what that will do, it will push it onto GitHub, and then that will be updated. So if someone new comes along to check your code or to pull from that code, let's say you have a new team member and they're going to work on a new feature, they can pull the most updated version. So all you have to do is when you're ready to launch it onto the web, you just hit push. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was just curious because, I mean, I'm able to commit and stage and commit in VS Code. I was just curious if we have to use GitKraken to actually push it up.
So if you are you doing it through the terminal?
No, VS Code, I don't know if I added something, but
like a plugin or something like that?
I don't think it's a plugin. On the left, the very left of VS Code,
extension?
there's under the magnifying glass, I have one that kind of looks like
Okay.
like a Y.
I honestly haven't used the source control in VS Code, so I'm not 100% on their way of doing it. So I can look into that for you and kind of get you a clearer answer. But you can do it through the command line, which is you just write a command that's like git push origin master, which is saying, hey, push this to the original master branch. But as far as the VS Code interface with source control, I'm going to have to do a little bit of digging into that because I'm not 100% how they do it.
Okay.
All right. Did that help at least a little bit?
Yeah, it did, because I mean,
Okay.
I wasn't really sure how to do it, so
Okay.
it took me some doing to get it working at all. Because
Yeah, I haven't used the source control interface on VS Code, so I'm gonna have to play with that and get back to you on that one.
my initial problem was when I downloaded Atom, installed it, it created one in like my user's root directory.
Okay.
So it was trying to stage like 3,000 files.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure.
it kept on throwing errors in VS Code. VS Code
Yeah,
like said, nope, there's too much. I don't want to deal with it.
right, because it was doing your whole computer.
Well, it wasn't C. It was like C users and then my username. So
Okay.
it wasn't everything, but I mean,
But close.
that
to.
folder had plenty in it because
Yeah.
it had my documents, my pictures, everything.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that when you're creating your repos, it is just associated to your project folder, because that is a common mistake. So if you think you're not going to do it, you might do it because everyone has done it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, to best my knowledge, it did it automatically when I installed Atom. So
Yeah,
I don't know why.
it might have been like the pathway that I installed. I'm not too sure what happened because I didn't see. But that is actually a very common thing that
Okay.
happens to people. So yeah. All right. So let's swing back into JavaScript gear here. And if you do have questions about terminal or source control, which we're not going to have time for today, please come see me in office hours or send me a message on Slack, and we can kind of find a time that works so we can discuss that. But I do want to make sure that you guys understand the DOM because your final project involves it quite a bit. So let's go over the DOM, and that will be our last topic of the day. Then I'll open the floor up to any questions. And yeah, so let's go ahead and jump back into JavaScript. So the DOM is the document object model, and it's a programming interface for HTML documents. Basically, it's what you see when you look at a web browser. So everything that you see is the DOM when you open up a website. There are different ways to grab information from the DOM in order to interact with the user or change information on the site, like when a button's clicked or a form is being submitted, things of that nature. So this is where we're going to use the document.get element by ID that you probably have seen, or if you haven't seen, you will see. There's different variations of this. I'm going to be focusing on grabbing it by the ID, but you can grab things by a class, by a tag name. There's a bunch of different variations out there, so be mindful of that. So let's see. Let me just whip up some code here real quick. Let's say I have a text area and that text area. And let's say I have a button, and let's say I have an H3 tag. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be creating a field for people to write some text, and then I'm going to count the total number of spaces in that text, and the result is going to be printed out once I hit a button. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to give all of these an ID. So I'll give this text area an ID of, let's say, user text. Okay, and then I'm going to give this H3 an ID of results. And then for the button, I'm not going to give an ID, but rather I'm going to use the onClick attribute, which I mentioned last lecture. And that's going to be onClick. And then what we set onClick equal to is the name of the JavaScript function we want to be performed when that button is clicked. So I'm going to call this function count spaces. So I'll just write count spaces with my parentheses here. Okay, and let me put this right here so it's a little bit easier to read. Save that. All right, so now in my JavaScript, I am going to create this function count spaces. So I'm going to first define my function, count spaces. And now I'm going to grab the information that the user inputted. So if we look at this in a browser, very ugly site, so please forgive me. We have this text area, and then we have this button. I want that button to say something, so I'm just going to say, click me. Refresh this. All right, so we have a text area, and we have a button. Okay, so whatever I type in here, I want to grab that text in order to count the total number of spaces in that text. So how we use that, how we do that is first we need to grab the document. So we write document. And then we want to get the element by ID. So get element by ID. And then we have parentheses. Inside of the parentheses is going to be that ID. Now remember, let me split this up here. The ID is user text. So the element that I want to grab by its ID is going to be user text. What this little piece of code does right here is it grabs the entire element, including the tags. I don't want that. I just want what's inside of the text area. So what I'm going to do is dot value. Okay, so that's going to grab what's inside of that text box. Now, I'm going to put this inside of a variable so it's easy for me to manage. So I'm just going to create a variable text and set that equal to that. And let me make sure you guys can see this a little bit better. Okay. So now text is equal to whatever the user wrote, right? So now what I want to do with that text is I want to look at this text and I want to count the total number of spaces in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called spaces, set that equal to 0, because that's going to be updated every time I run into a space. So this is where a for loop comes into play. So I am going to loop through every single character inside of this text. And you can kind of think of it, you can think of this text as an array of characters, right? So I'm going to start off at 0. I'm going to make sure I is less than text.length. I'm going to increment I by 1. And then inside of that, I'm going to check if text at index I is equal to the space character. If it is equal to the space character, then I'm going to increment spaces by 1. Okay? And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to look at every single character in this text, and if it's a space, I'm going to update my space counter. Okay? So that's all that this for loop is doing. Once that is done, I have the total number of spaces, so I can print out those results back onto the DOM. So how we do that is document, get element by ID, and now we're grabbing the results element. Well, it's a H3 element with the results ID. And then we're going to do dot inner HTML. What inner HTML is basically everything that's in between that opening and closing tag. What I want to do is I want to change that inner HTML. Right now, there's nothing in there. I want to put something in there. So I'm going to set that equal to there are plus spaces in the text. Okay. Let me make that smaller. Okay. So I ran this pretty quickly. I'm going to show you the result, and then I'm going to take questions on this. So if we go back here and we refresh, it says I am counting the spaces. Oh, I forgot to write the word spaces. Hold on. We get 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 spaces in that text. Okay. So this is a combination of kind of all the things that we learned. I ran through that pretty quickly, so I do expect questions. Are there any questions on what I just did? Got a question here. Pasqualina?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so in the last space here where you said that you were doing it for the enter HTML, what does that look like in the actual document if you change it all? Like, if there's
So,
spaces where you don't need them to be, do they change as well?
So with the inner HTML, that's basically what's written in between the opening and closing tags. So if I had some, let's say I wrote, there will be results here. This little segment is considered the inner HTML of this element with this ID. So what I'm
Okay.
doing is I'm changing that value. So kind of how we changed a variable value, we're changing
Right.
the inner HTML there. So if I were,
Okay.
hold on, let me save that. So if we were to refresh this, this is that inner HTML, and that's what I'm changing.
So that's basically how you define like the text in between the HTML for
Right. So
Java.
any text in between an opening and closing tag is going to be considered inner HTML.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Any questions on anything we've discussed? If statements, variables, functions, loops, arrays, indexes, indices. I don't know how the plural of that is. Any questions on anything you've come across in the curriculum? It's open floor. So anything you have, just lay it on me. All right. Go ahead. There we go.
I just had a question about the projects. Since I wasn't able to connect with my student advisor just yet, how will I go about having the projects that I've already submitted in the dashboard?
I'm not understanding.
Well, I don't have documents for those files that I submitted in the actual dashboard field. I don't have any backups of them because I didn't know how to save them.
Okay. So you submitted them. Okay. So what I would recommend you to do is create files on your computer, and you can go back and copy and paste those. And if for whatever reason you can't, just let me know, because I have a copy of them and I can send you the documents. But you should be able to go back to those projects. You can't resubmit, but you can see the code that you did submit, and you should be able to copy and paste it. But if for whatever reason you cannot, let me know.
Okay, I sure will. Thank you.
I have something. If you click on it, the ones that you already submitted, there's like a little down arrow with like, looks like a hard drive right next to each project you submit.
They have a download button now?
Yeah, so if you click on it once, it like prepares it, and then it says ready, and then you click it again, and it downloads the files that you submitted.
There you go.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? All right. Well, if you guys do not have any questions, I want to thank you for coming to lecture today. This is recorded, so I will be posting this. So if you came in late, you can catch the earlier part of this lecture. It does take a while for the video to format, so it'll either be by the end of the day or early in the morning tomorrow. But either way, it will be recorded. And I'm just going to open the floor up just one last time for any last minute questions. Please take advantage of this time.
Ms. Matos?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't have any questions right now, but I did just want to say I'm looking forward to digging more into the curriculum and reaching out to you this week. I wasn't able to do it for some other reasons, but I just wanted to say that on here.
Well, I am glad to have you, and please do not be shy in reaching out to me. If you can't make it to office hours and you need that office hours time, please let me know so we can kind of figure out another. I mean, I do teach a lot of courses, but I will find the time in order to meet with you if you need that extra help, or if you can't meet with your mentor, or if you're having problems with your mentor, let me know and we can kind of get everything sorted out, because I do want to make sure you guys are getting the support that you do need in order to be successful in the course. And I understand that everyone has full-time jobs, they got to pay their bills, got kids and all that good stuff. So please reach out to me if there are any issues at all, or if you need that extra help.
Okay, awesome. I'll definitely be reaching out to you finally on Slack today. So.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about just the format of the curriculum. So the 2 weeks, the sessions that are in there now, they disappear Monday, and then there'll be 10 more lessons. Is that how that works?
Right. So once the course has been completed, on Monday morning, you will get loaded your next course. And that it's usually a 10 lesson format. Some of our courses are a little bit more lessons than that. But those announcements and everything that is attached to that course is going to disappear. So if you need some information from the announcements, or if you want to save those lectures, create a bookmark folder and save those. And then you might have a new instructor. So I may not be your instructor. Well, I'm not your instructor for the next course. The next course, the instructor is Isaac. So I'm not always going to be your instructor. You'll see me again, but on Monday, it will be as if you're in a brand new course.
Okay, and how do you bookmark the lessons?
So here, let's see. Do you use Chrome?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just pretend this is the video, right? I'm on the video. You can click on this little star, and then you can create a new folder. So click on the star, then choose another folder. I'm going to create a new folder in my bookmark bar called Lectures. And then you can save that like CFS Lecture 1, and then hit save.
I get it. I guess I meant, I didn't think that you were referring to lectures. I thought you were referring to the data that's in the curriculum that we're reading before
you can always go back to the course material.
You can, okay.
Yeah. You can always go back to the older courses in that material and go through that. But the announcement section, right, that's not saved. That's being updated, so it is saved. So you can go back to it at any time. But currently, it's not updated. So you want to make sure that you save those links.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
I also had a question.
Mm-hmm.
When I did the JavaScript project, and I submit it, how do I actually know that my code was right?
So you want to, I would recommend testing out, because the preview feature inside of that, I'm not a huge fan of it because it doesn't always work right. So I would test it out in VS Code and test it through the browser. So just write, I always recommend writing in VS Code and then just transferring everything over when you're completed. That way you kind of have the ability to test out your code and see what's going on. So just open it in a browser, kind of like I did here. So let me go. So I have my code, right? You write your code, you have your files, all that good stuff. And then you can just right click and, oops, and open in default browser. And then you can test it out here to see if it's doing what you need it to do. And then you can click inspect. If it's not doing what you need it to do, you click and inspect and hit console, and then there will be error messages here if something's wrong.
All right, because like I wrote a code and then I would click the preview button and like it did nothing, so I wasn't even sure if that's
if you're writing just strictly JavaScript, like there's no DOM, like you're not dealing with any HTML or CSS anything, you can still test it this way. Nothing's going to appear, like it's going to be a blank page because you're not writing any HTML, but you can hit inspect and then go to the console, and this will be where those error messages appear. So even if there's nothing there because there's no HTML, it will tell you if anything's wrong with your JavaScript here.
Okay, gotcha.
So I had one more question about the Visual Studio. Is there a good tutorial to understand the scope of it? And
I can find one for you and send that information your way, because there is a lot in Visual Studio Code. There's a lot of extensions, a lot of features. So I will get those resources for you so you can kind of have like a rundown of how everything works and send that to you.
That'd be great. I watched a few YouTube videos, but I just felt like my time was being wasted. Like it wasn't ever getting to like the meat of the way that the program worked. It just showed really simplified basics. And so if you have like a good resource, I would love it.
Okay. So I can understand what you're kind of looking for. You're trying to see how the text editor, because there's so many components, so I'm not really too sure what you're looking for as far.
Well, I'm a big picture learner, and so if I'm watching a 10-minute video on how to download it and open it, I'm like, God,
got you.
You know?
Okay. I have a
another 10-minute video on something else. It's like,
Okay. I have an understanding now. Okay. Yes, I will get you those resources.
I appreciate it.
I came in here late. Who do we do our code review with, or how do I get that in?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. 1 second. It's very low. Okay, go ahead.
I came in here a little bit late in the middle.
Okay.
Of who do we do our code review with, like for our final project and all that?
So you're going to want to do that with your mentor. So the mentors are in charge of grading, and then I do a final review on all the grades to make sure the mentors didn't grade your projects crazy. So you're going to do the final review with your mentor. If you want me to take a look at it and you want to have that one-on-one time with me, come to office hours. If you can't make it to that, let me know through Slack and we can set up something. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. All right, anybody else? All right, well, we'll call that a wrap. I want to thank you again for coming to lecture today. If something slipped your mind and you forgot to ask me, please send me a message on Slack. Do not be afraid of me, and we'll get that worked out. So thanks again. Good luck with everything. If you have any questions, please, please, please reach out. All right.
Thank you.
Guys. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.